Now, as you know, um, this workshop was first conceived as a face-to-face workshop, and then I was obliged to turn it into a virtual or online one. And I hope it will be a success, and you'll support me in that because it has to be an interactive workshop. Now, the title is Stereotypes, a Curse or a Blessing, Implications on Cultural Diversity Teaching. So from the title itself, you understand that this workshop will be divided into two parts: stereotypes as a curse and their implications on cultural diversity teaching, and stereotypes as a blessing and their implications on cultural diversity teaching. And I add something else to the to-do list, that is, you put yourself in your students' skin. It means that you need to live the experience, the intercultural experience that your students will go through within your own activities. And that's a way to reflect on your activities and maybe change and correct some things in these activities. Now, the stereotypes are always considered as obstacles that we as teachers and policymakers, etc., have to help our students to overcome. But in most of the times, we fail in this task because maybe because of our teaching practices or the curriculum, etc. Now, stereotypes, the first part will be stereotypes as a curse, and we'll see the cases in which stereotypes are considered a curse in cultural diversity teaching. Now, in the workshop, that is the face-to-face one, I intended to put you into groups and you have to move around, etc. But when I changed into an online one, I chose to give you some of the outcomes of this activity when administered to my students. So most of the time, I divide my students into groups of 4 or 5, and I call it the islands activity. So each group will stand in one island or apart in one corner of the classroom, and they will write on a sheet of paper some information about different cultures. And they are free to use their mobile phones. But most of the time, they give me facts, geographical facts, for example, or economical facts or societal facts. And if they speak about the cultures, they use or they speak about the outer layer or the surface layer of these cultures. And this is most of the time what I find in their statements. Mexicans are drug addicts, Americans are racist. Okay, sorry, I have to move my face here. Okay, the French are true lovers. Our French friends will tell us if it's true or not. The Japanese behave like robots. Germans are rigid. And when they speak about their cultures, they say, our food is the best, for example, or our culture is the best. So you can see that they use subjective statements because they use evaluative adjectives, they use superlatives, the best, the worst, etc. And they use generalizations. They put the same they put the people of the same cultures in the same basket, which is not about diversity or cultural diversity teaching. And then I tell them to guess the nationality of these two guys. Now you can answer me if you want. Can you tell the nationality of these two handsome guys? Both of them have mustache. Both of them wear the same head outfit. Any volunteer? I can't hear you. Okay.
Tunisian.
Greeks.
The first or the second?
Tunisian is the second.
Okay, the second is Tunisian. Now the first one, what nation?
Moroccan.
Yes?
Moroccan.
No?
Greek.
His Croatian. Yeah. And the second one is Tunisian. So they have the same, let us say, the same outfit or head outfit that is, but the most intriguing thing here is that they practically have the same name. In Tunisia, we call it Shashia, and Croatia, do you know what do they call it? In Croatia, they call it Sheshe. So in Tunisian, we say Shashia, and in Croatia, they call it Sheshe. Now, the question is, can you guess what is the factor, or why do we have the same cultural product in two different cultures and they are geographically apart? Yes?
No.
Okay, I tell you that because of historical events, and historically speaking, both countries were under the control of the Ottoman Empire. So it's pretty much about colonization. So colonization is the factor that reunited and linked these two cultures. Now, as Nada said, we have to begin from ourselves, from our cultures. We have to localize them. So you give them examples from your own culture or their own culture and compare them, compare, for example, the cultural products or the practices of their own culture to other cultures and find similarities and differences also. There's another example that I like it very much, and it's about Elisa and the bull skin. It's a myth, but in Tunisia we like to believe in this myth because it adds some romance and intelligence to history. And as you know, most of historical events are insane, and they lack a lot of romance. So Elisa was a Lebanese princess. She escaped her brother, and she wanted to settle in Tunisia. But the locals told her that she only has the right for the surface of the bull skin and to settle. So she ordered to cut that bull skin into a really very thin thread, and that was the frontiers of her new city. Actually, they call it Cartagena. It means the new city, and all of the people know that it's Carthage now. Now, the thing is that Elisa, when she came, she brought her culture to Tunisia. But it was not only a relationship of give, but also of take. She took a lot from the Tunisian culture, of course. And uh, this is something that uh, will make it very easy for the students to understand that cultures are not isolated islands, as Thomas Hyland Erickson said. Now, cultures are not isolated islands because they borrow from each other. That's why we can find the same cultural products or practices in different cultures, the same vocabulary in different languages, etc. And culture is not static. And if you teach culture as static, you will be teaching stereotypes. We will put cultures in specific frames. That's why culture is changing and evolving. Otherwise, it will die and disappear. And there are many examples from history. Some tribes, for example, died because they didn't develop, because they didn't evolve. And many languages died because they didn't evolve. And um, these cultures, because they're not isolated islands, they have a dialogue that is called intercultural dialogue. And for intercultural dialogue, you need to be interculturally competent. Otherwise, you can't have an intercultural dialogue that is successful and effective. That's why stereotypes will be a big problem, an obstacle towards openness to other cultures. Now, let us go back to the islands: Mexican culture, American culture, French culture, Japanese, German, and Tunisian culture. Now, I would like you to brainstorm some of the factors that may link cultures, that may lead cultures to borrow from each other, apart from colonization. Yes?
Japanese and German.
No, don't Nada, don't look at the cultures. These are mere examples. Now, in
Okay.
general,
In general, okay.
yeah, we have colonization.
And like
We have,
this.
yes, we have also trade, for example, or commerce. From the beginning, there were a lot of trade relationships between countries, and sailors, for example, bring their culture to the country they visit, etc. There are also maritime movements, and this goes back to the exploration movements, Christopher Columbus, etc. And you know that in history there were big empires that rely on their maritime movements, but it would be very interesting to study what these maritime movements brought to the different cultures. There's also transport or transport means, and the development and the revolution in transport means. And computer mediated technologies, that is the I think let us say internet is the most interesting event in history, because without internet we couldn't manage to see each other now. So as you know, because of the restrictions, COVID-19, etc., we couldn't move from one country to another. So this is a solution. And computer-mediated technologies blurred the frontiers between cultures. Of course, the social media is one interesting factor. Now, I think I have 500 friends on Facebook, and half of them are from different nationalities. And this interaction between me and them changed a lot in me, and maybe changed a lot in them. And you can see that in social media, we pretty much use the same language. I'm not here speaking about English, but the same vocabulary, the same concepts are exchanged. And of course, the lingua franca. So humanity needs a lingua franca all the time. We began with Latin, which was the lingua franca, and now English, because we need to exchange and the same, let us say, the same interests, etc. And this made us think of the same concepts. That's why I always say that there are no limits and frontiers between cultures. They're all blurred. And I leave the most interesting factor to in this linkage and relationships between cultures, uh, that is globalization. Globalization is not only a movement of merchandise, but also of cultures. Now, what is the implications, or what are the implications on cultural diversity teaching? Of course, when you teach your students cultures as isolated islands. So what will happen if you teach your students cultures as isolated islands, or facts, or subjective statements and do's and don'ts? They will generalize, or they will make categorizations first of cultures as polite or impolite, uh, um, peaceful or violent, masculine or feminine, etc. They will make generalizations. They will put this people from the same culture in the same basket, and this is not correct. They will generate stereotypes, and what is more dangerous is that they will adopt prejudices, and they will adopt some discriminatory actions. They will be ethnocentric. Ethnocentrism means that they won't accept other cultures. They won't be open to other cultures, or totally the opposite. They will be Eurocentric. It means they will cherish everything that comes from the West, and you won't develop their intercultural communicative skills. Because if you give them only the rules, or the do's and don'ts, or the stereotypes, they can't transfer the knowledge, or the skills, or the techniques of communication to other cultures, or to other cultural encounters, and they will be isolated. I give you the example, of course, I'm speaking about stereotyped people. They will feel isolated. I give you the example of my cousin. When she gave birth to a handsome boy, she wanted to call him Islam in Tunisian Arabic. But her husband told her, no, what if he goes to America? He will be discriminated, he will be a subject of violence, etc. So this is the sense of isolation that stereotyped people will feel. And of course, if you teach your students cultures as isolated islands, you will teach them to have essentialist attitudes. It means either us or them. It means that they will feel either the best or the worst, etc. Now, also, you will be teaching the surface layer of cultures. As I said, you'll be teaching the traditions, or the practices, or the behaviors of people from different cultures, as if these behaviors won't change. Example, you tell them, Japanese people, when you are in Japan, don't open a gift in front of your host, which is not, now it's no longer a rule. You can act uh, the way that is under a globalized world. Now, the second part of the workshop is stereotypes as a blessing. Now, as this be, we want our students to take the best from our teaching practices. Now, this guy, normally our Arab partners, they know him. His Abu Nawais, he was a very famous poet, and he liked wine very much. He was a heavy drinker. Uh, and people kept on telling him, why do you drink so much? And he said, I have to drink because wine is my disease, and it's also my cure. So in Arabic, وداوني بالتي كانت هي الداء. This is Arabic, and I translate it for you, and cure me with what was the disease. And it's the same principle for the vaccine of COVID-19, or any vaccine, I think. I'm not a doctor, but normally this is the rule. So here there are three main, let us say, ways or methods for making a vaccine, either using a whole virus or bacterium or parts that trigger the immune system or just the genetic material. So it's the same principle. You have to use the virus itself to cure the disease. And it's the same thing with teaching stereotypes, or if you want to discard stereotypes or make your students overcome this obstacle, you need to use stereotypes themselves through different activities. And the first activity is discussion starters. Okay, you can use stereotypes in discussion starters. And I usually use discussion starters on two levels. The first one is the individual level. You let your students reflect on their own individual experience. For example, you ask them, have you ever been stereotyped and how? Were you stereotyped on a cultural basis? Is it true? How did you feel? And I usually begin by myself. For example, I give them something that happened to me before. Uh, Now, one of my colleagues told me, uh, asked me, uh, do you smoke or are you a smoker? And I told him no. Why? He said, because you have short hair. So he linked short hair to smoking. Now, I didn't understand on the spot, but then I understood that a short haired woman means or is stereotyped as a liberated woman, etc., a strong woman. So, liberated women in Tunisian culture or in his opinion, she must be a smoker. Now, in another culture, it may mean another thing, okay? But in Tunisia, in some parts of Tunisia, maybe this means that uh, short-haired woman must be liberated woman, which is not true in my case. I'm not strong. I'm really emotional. I cry a lot, etc. Okay. Now, is it true? It's not true, of course. And how did you feel? I felt, of course, frustrated, uh, uh, but I understand that someone else, in another case, for example, a Black woman, and who is stereotyped, she will be feeling something else, more violent feeling. So the conclusions is that stereotypes are harmful and stereotypes hide the truth of individuals. Now, in the case of a face-to-face workshop, it would be better if you yourself reflect on your own experience with stereotypes. So if anyone wants to speak about his experience with stereotypes, you can go to the mic and tell us. And this is an individual experience. It doesn't have to be a cultural stereotype. Okay, we can move on to the group experience. So stereotypes hinder communication, as you know, because if you build a stereotype on someone else, it will be an obstacle in front of communication. And then I move on to the group experience. They may use stereotypes in order to speak about the culture itself, their culture. So you begin with the individual experience and you end up with a group experience. You can ask them, think of how your culture is seen by others. How is it stereotyped? Is the stereotype true? And do all people of your culture behave the same? Now, I can give the example of one of my students who's Spanish. Yes, not yesterday, it's last year. Last year, he told me that people think of Spanish as sleepers, as great dancers, and as eaters of paella. Now, our Spanish friends, do you confirm?
Me.
Yeah?
I'm a very bad dancer, I can assure you. Bad dancer. And sometimes I eat paella, maybe once.
Yes. So not all of the time.
No.
Okay. So you see, stereotypes are not true. In your case, it's not true. Okay. So we can't put all people in the same basket. Conclusions, stereotypes are, yes?
No, I wanted to say for paella, no? If you read on the internet what to do in Spain, it's always written eat paella, okay?
Yeah.
This is maybe the stereotype that was somehow imposed through different media and so on, because you think at the end that the Spanish are eating paella, no?
And indeed, paella is only
Yeah.
south in the Mediterranean south coast. If you go to the north, they don't eat paella.
Yeah.
Never.
But you know the origin
Yeah.
of it, right?
Sorry?
The origin of paella, you know what's the origin of that?
The original
The origin of paella is
in Valencia.
in the south because it's an Arabic culture it's called the leftover,
Ah.
baqaya. So
Yeah.
to add rice and probably
Whatever.
Yes. So
and that's why it was the lift of the rice and the meat and they used to put it in one pot and they call it paella. That's
Yes,
why.
maybe.
yes.
Makes sense.
And yeah, and this is why the theory of borrowing is correct here. So it's not a purely Spanish. It can be something that came from Arab countries or okay. So there is no limit between cultures. And stereotypes are essentialist observations. That is the us versus them. Okay, now look at this caricature. These two people, they have a misunderstanding. Someone is speaking about snowballs, the other one is speaking about coconuts. They're not wearing the same outfit. Okay, so this is about misunderstanding. Snowballs? I thought we were discussing coconuts. Now, my next activity is critical cultural incidents. I don't know if you know the meaning of critical cultural incidents or if you use them in your classrooms. The critical cultural incidents. Okay, a critical cultural incident is a narrative. It's a text that illustrates a misunderstanding between two or more people from different cultural backgrounds. But you can use a critical cultural incident between two people from the same culture, but having different understandings. And critical incidents are occasions that stay in mind. They refer to communication situations, usually problematic and confusing, even amusing. That's why critical cultural incidents can be used in storytellings. In a storytelling, you can use something that stayed in your mind. I don't know, a misunderstanding, a stereotypical situation, someone who stereotyped you. For example, the situation in which that guy stereotyped me as a short-haired woman, strong woman, liberated woman, a smoking woman. I can put it into a digital storytelling. Now, so I tried to write three critical incidents. Now, in the critical incidents, you can take them from books or you can write them yourself. You reflect on your own experience. They are usually short. You don't need to write a long text. Now, the first one is culture shock. I will read these critical incidents and will try to find out the characteristics of stereotypes and how we can overcome them, etc. So, culture shock. When we were on a linguistic trip, the host thought we live in tents, although he was very nice to us. My friend wanted to correct his misconception by saying, Dorsaf's siblings are doctors. He cried with a shocking tone, Doctors living in tents? How strange. And this happened to me, really. So our host, the British guy, although he was nice to us, he thought that we were living, Tunisian people were living in tents. Now, can you tell me a little bit about one characteristic here of the stereotype? Did he change his mind when my friend said Dorsaf's siblings are doctors? No. He said with a shocking tone, doctors living in tents? How strange. So stereotypes are rigid. You can't erase a stereotype very easily. Like the example, although black, she's beautiful. As if black people are not beautiful. And when you say she's beautiful, although she's black, you're still in the stereotype. You pretend that you are nice to people, but in your inner self, I think you believe in that stereotype, and stereotype is inherited. Like in the case of my students, they inherited the stereotypes. I told them, have you ever met a Mexican guy? And they said no. So they heard from their parents, or I don't know, they heard that Mexicans are drug addicts. So stereotypes, this stereotype will be with them all their lives, unless you, the teacher, can make them overcome that or erase it. And stereotypes prevent us from seeing the truth. This is recurrent. Now, the second one, critical incident B, the taxi driver. It's also another situation that I lived, and I would like to share with you. During the elections of 2014, a taxi driver said, "It's insane that a woman becomes president," not noticing that I'm a woman too. I said, "Why not? There are successful female politicians in countries like Germany." He answered, "Huh? Are you comparing Tunisian women to German women?" Now, how many stereotypes are there here?
Two. Being
Two.
a woman and being a Tunisian.
Yeah, being a woman and being a Tunisian. So gender and cultural stereotypes. You can combine them. But the problem is, and it's a really dangerous thing, is that stereotyped people, they believe in the stereotypes, in their stereotypes. Okay, they will always have this isolation feeling, as I said before. And this guy, although he's Tunisian, he didn't believe in the fact that a Tunisian woman could be as a Tunisian German. Okay, so in his opinion, a woman is not as equal as a man, and a Tunisian woman is not as equal as a German woman. Now, the third critical incident warning, I used it before in one of the, I think in the first webinar of the project. During an international conference, a professor advised local students to be polite when writing emails to British people. She said they are very polite, as if Tunisian people are not, Tunisian students are not polite. So here, there is a categorization of cultures. Stereotypes categorize cultures into polite and impolite, peaceful and violent, masculine and feminine, etc. And stereotyped people feel marginalized and have low self-esteem. So when you tell vulnerable students not to write an impolite English between inverted commas, they will feel this low self-esteem, as if they can't write something polite. And you should teach your students that, of course, I'm speaking about English here. If you teach English, don't teach them the norms of British or American only, but teach them the lingua franca in general. Teach them how to use English for local purposes or aims, to speak about their own cultures. Now, there are other ways to use stereotypes in cultural diversity teaching, like simulations. You write something for them as if it's like a drama or a play, but you have to divide the simulation into tasks. And in each task, they're going to learn something. And in these simulations, you can put them into real life situations in which they will find different cultures and how they can communicate with another person from a different culture, and they have already a stereotype about that person. Okay, and they will try to find solutions, and they try to manage to make this communication or intercultural communication successful. And you can also give them scenarios, problematic, and they have to find solutions for them. Or they can reflect on pictures or videos, like this one, for example. You can tell them to reflect on a picture like that and relate or link it to stereotypes, and how stereotypes, if you liberate yourself from stereotypes, you can be open to other cultures and respect other cultures and be successful in your intercultural communication. And afterwards, you can find a job on an international level. Okay, and you can use multicultural literature. I spoke about multicultural literature in the second webinar. And in multicultural literature, you can use English in speaking about other cultures and how you help your students destroy the stereotypes they have about these cultures. Now, the implications on teaching culture, cultural diversity, if you teach stereotypes as instruments or tools, you will lead your students to think critically about their intercultural experience, for example. They will think critically about the stereotypes they have in mind. They will judge these stereotypes and try to erase them and change them with the truth. They will understand the problematic and find solutions for it. They will develop their intercultural communicative competence, and this communicative competence, they need it to transfer communication techniques to different intercultural encounters. Now, can you make your own conclusion? Okay. Stereotypes, a curse or a blessing, implications on cultural diversity teaching. This is the title. Now, as I said, it's made up of two parts. The first one, stereotypes are a curse. In which case stereotypes are a curse? If you teach, for example, your students as cultures as isolated islands, you will lead them to stereotypes. So stereotypes here will be learning objectives. or teaching aims, not an instrument. They will be a purpose in themselves, an objective, which we don't want to. Okay, so stereotypes occurs when they are learning objectives, when you adopt them as learning objectives or teaching aims, and stereotypes are a blessing when you adopt them as teaching instruments or tools. Okay. Now, I would like you to complete this conclusion. Okay, it's like fill in the gaps exercise. Stereotypes should not be taught as what?
Learning objectives.
Yes, good. As learning objectives, but as,
Instrument.
yes, as instruments and tools, yes, or input. Okay, in order to discard what?
Stereotypes.
Yes, stereotypes, or in order to discard them, the stereotypes, and accept the
Diversity.
yes, diversity, or you accept the other or the differences. That is the from cultural diversity teaching. Yes, good. That is the aim from cultural diversity teaching. And this is a summary for the whole workshop, let us say, or lecture. And the best conclusion ever is that although we are different, we all laugh in the same language. And I would like to thank you in the different languages. Shukran jazilan, gracias, havala. Okay, and thank you.